If I'm effective, it's because of one simple fact.
David Fincher's newest film, The Killer, is out, and here again we find the precise, slick visual language he has steadily built his reputation on.
Fuck.
But there's something else about a Fincher film which I think is often missed. So much attention is paid to how a Fincher film looks. But what about how a David Fincher film sounds?
It's beyond production value. Sound is a portal into a stranger's mind that is incredibly influential. And if we don't avail ourselves of this access, then we're stupid and we should die.
There's something special about the sonic landscape of these films.
I find music a useful distraction.
That old saying, how you always hurt the one you love. Well, it works both ways.
But you can't talk about what a Fincher film sounds like without mentioning one of his longest creative collaborators.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Yeah, we're getting something. Now we're getting something. Okay, now.
Ren's he's not a slider guy. He's not a knob guy. He's not a headphone guy or a mic guy. He's a storyteller.
Starting with Se7en, Ren Klyce has played an integral part in the design of the sonic world of virtually every single Fincher project. In all, that amounts to 11 features, 3 series, and countless ads and commercials. And it's starting with Se7en that a through line begins to emerge.
We do something about this music? Man, we're working on it. We're looking for the guy.
Klyce has a way of building a sonic landscape that extends beyond the frame. It's subtextual, often providing the thematic context for Fincher's films. And Klyce's utilization of it is something worth paying attention to.
Have you ever had any sexually transmitted diseases?
In the intro to the scene from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, notice how this dialogue is pre-lapped. We get the ambience of Elizabeth Salander's arrival at the office while simultaneously hearing the conversation from the incoming scene.
How many partners have you had in the last month? And how many of those were men?
But this sonic transition is setting up a very pivotal sound. Here, listen again.
And when was the last time that you were tested for HIV?
That sound of the floor polisher, that is a very important sound.
One sequence that's pretty difficult to watch, it's in the office with Eric Bierman. Salander comes late at night to get some money, and as she walks down the hallway, everyone's sort of leaving for the night, and we see the lone floor polisher man cleaning up after everyone. And it was really important to David to have that sound of the floor polisher sort of be banging against the wall during the interview to kind of do several things. One was just to create a sound of distraction, but also to signify they're the only ones in the office.
Why don't we start with that?
This is the brilliance of great sound design.
Why don't we start with me?
Something that seems as simple as the hum of a floor polisher becomes something much more menacing.
You do something for me, I do something for you.
But Klyce doesn't stop here. As the scene takes a more ominous turn, the sound becomes something else completely.
I want you to have that computer.
The hum slowly dissolves into this droning frequency, the score, but it's almost imperceptible. It's as if the sound was music and the music was sound. And this is a motif you can hear running throughout Klyce's work with Fincher. The way the line between sound and music is blurred.
Who am I speaking with?
This is the Zodiac speaking.
But to really appreciate this, we need to go back a little bit.
Is there something I can call you that's a little less ominous?
Zodiac marks an important moment in Fincher and Klyce's collaborative work.
When we did Zodiac, was the first film that I decided maybe it would be a good idea for me to mix the music, because I was so involved in temping of that score that it really made sense for me to just mix.
Sam?
Knows they're tracing his calls.
And since then, yes, to answer your question, I have been mixing the music on David's films.
It's with this film that Klyce took on the role of re-recording mixer with focus on the music. And something interesting happened.
You can talk to him in here. Coke machine.
We hear the sounds of the factory, the whirring of the machines, and the reverberance of the space.
So how do you guys want to do this?
This is the sonic world building. The tonal differences between the break room and the outside factory are established. But listen to what happens as the suspect begins taunting investigators with ambiguous references to the Zodiac's crimes.
What? I had knives in my car that weekend. Maybe Bill saw them and called the other officer on me.
Well, we'll be checking in on that. Let me ask you something else. Were you ever in Southern California at any time in 1966?
The factory sounds have been modulated, and the effect is almost musical.
So you aren't angry about being fired from Valley Springs for touching your students?
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
It's subtle, but again, this line between sound and music is blurred. And this has a lot to do with Klyce's early influences.
I went to school to study music, and I was a music major. What really got me excited was a different form of music called Musique Concrète, which was developed in the 1940s by two French composers, Pierre-Henri and Pierre Schaeffer.
Musique Concrète is a type of composition that uses recorded sound as its raw material. It's how you recognize the key signature of score in the hum of a floor polisher, and the way factory sounds can morph into an eerie ambience.
And it was the whole idea of, let's challenge what is music. Like, for me, music and sound they live together, and they coexist. So it really didn't make much difference to me. They were all one and the same.
And this is the genius of Ren Klyce's work in David Fincher's films.
There you go.
His sounds are more than just supportive of what's on screen.
Sure.
Stick to your plan.
They are why we can precisely map out perspective in a dark house.
Anticipate, don't improvise.
These sounds go a long way in conveying the geography of the space.
Trust no one.
So we too can clock where the dangers are coming from.
Fight only the battle you're paid to fight.
It's the way a sound bed full of buzzing cicadas can become a metaphor for the cacophony of journalists and reporters hovering just outside. His sound design moves beyond the screen, and it's a fundamental aspect of what makes a Fincher film feel, well, like a Fincher film.
Ren is loved and adored with Fincher's core. There's a core kind of group of us that are always working together. And he's more than just the sound designer. He's the sonic kind of guru. And he's going to be involved with everything sound, with the music, with the dialogue, the sound design, all things kind of like come and pass through Ren's filter. He's always sprinkling in pieces of sound to help character. And it's not being asked for or sought after, it's more like he's looking for opportunities.
As re-recording mixer, Klyce touches every sound in the mix. That includes the music or score, the effects,
Hello, Tokyo?
the dialogue, which in this case is ADR,
London, you there? Ah, nerds.
What is that?
as well as ambient backgrounds. balancing it all together for the final composite mix.
What's nerds?
Nerds is Brooklynese for nuts.
Jeepers.
And Klyce really pushes the possibilities of what sound can do. His sounds have storytelling power in the way they subtly expand the world, creating anxiety and tension through the way he juxtaposes one sound against another. But a conversation about the sounds of Fincher wouldn't really be complete without the mention of one more key detail. For the iconic opening credits of Seven, Klyce remixed a version of 9 Inch Nails' Closer. It stood as a bit of a footnote to the enduring collaboration to come.
Who paid for the trip?
It was paid for at the $1,000 account I had set up a few months earlier.
At this point, your $1,000 was the only money that had been put into the company.
Yes.
How did you feel the meetings went?
It's subtle, but what's nice about it is everything's a little bit out of tune and everything's kind of out of time a bit, and one's warbling and the other one's steady, and it kind of gets a nice organic texture that you wouldn't get from a digital synth or from a quantized fixed performance. And then in unsolo.
No, excuse me 1 second. What sound is he making? Is that like a tisk?
It wasn't a tisk.
The Social Network marked the start of Fincher's partnership with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And it's the opening of this film that is a prime example of just how evocative sound design and score, working together, can be.
I didn't know they take SATs in China.
They don't. I wasn't talking about China anymore. I was talking about me.
I know. You've seen this scene analyzed backwards and forwards. The editing, the dialogue, the composition. But while many have talked about the importance of this exchange, few have discussed the sleight of hand sound design plays in setting up our emotional perspective for the rest of the film. The issue? How do you get an audience to identify with, perhaps even feel sorry for, a billionaire who also happens to be Mark Zuckerberg? Well, you start at the beginning. Important to any sound bed is the world building. And when the main character is known for a particular choice of footwear, well...
The sound effects, we were also being, every time Mark was running, he wanted to hear every leaf crunch and then the flip-flop banging up against Zuckerberg's his heel and all the voices. And so that's sort of the etude of piano and flip-flops.
This also means making that college bar at the opening feel like, well, a real college bar.
Would you like to talk about something else?
No. It's just since the beginning of the conversation about Finals Club, I think I may have missed a birthday.
When you're mixing sound for film, there's a tendency to kind of go, okay, let's pull all that crap down and make sure the dialogue is nice and clear so that we can hear everything. That's sort of your first position. And David Fincher would come in and say, I don't like that. It sounds too much like a stage play. It sounds too much like a film. I want it to sound like real life. And bring up the noise, bring up the noise.
So we're even.
I think we should just be friends.
I don't want friends.
Fincher wanted this bar to sound loud, like a real
There's
bar.
Some pressure right now from my OS class, and if we could just order some food, I think we should.
That meant booming music, along with raucous crowd noise, all competing with this dialogue.
You're gonna go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole.
And here's why Klyce is a master. Up to this point, he's been supporting what's on screen. But after Erica delivers her line, listen to how the ambience suddenly turns expressionistic. That drop in sound, that is brilliant sound design, but it's still missing something.
We kind of happened upon that track by accident, really, because David said, well, we got all these tracks, and what should we do? And we had a few tracks from the Ghost record, and then every single piece that they gave us, we put it in, and we're just like, oh, that's actually really nice. One of them has a rhythmic quality to it. Another one had sort of a percolating sort of wheels in his head quality to it that fit him running, and they were all really they all work differently in their own way. And then that one piece that we have here.
This is the one, Hand Covers Bruise,
the one that's in the film.
Yeah.
We just by accident sort of put it up to the image, and it for some odd reason worked because it was so unexpected.
Hand Covers Bruise was never meant to open the film, but it works so perfectly because it pushes us into Zuckerberg's subjectivity, what he's feeling, and the way Klyce mixes it with that expressionistic drop in sound really sets up our emotional perspective right from the opening credits. Sound is doing so much heavy lifting here, which I think is something an audience can often take for granted.
So I think you're right. I mean, it's one of my favorite moments too, because it is all these little tiny things trying to define Zuckerberg's character. You know, kind of his heartbeat is this piano and this loneliness, and then everything else is just sort of, he's not really connected to the world at all. I mean, he's sort of just on the periphery of it all. You know, so all the people that are having fun in the other dorms or these parties and whatnot, he's not really connected to that. And so I think that's what we were so excited about in that opening scene.
And I've got to say, again, in the whole process of this, I mean, I have to give all the credit to Ren in terms of when we saw where they'd placed the music, then we realized, whoa, I mean, the lion's share of the composition has been finished, and Ren's chosen what sits in the film. It really, we were stunned.
I know there's a lot of focus on what a Fincher film looks like, but I'd argue they are just as interesting for the way they sound.
And that's just one of the jobs that the sound editor has. It's a lonely job. And because no one notices the work. But ultimately, it's very satisfying because if, in fact, no one notices the work, that means you actually did it correctly.